The glass doors of Helix Global Logistics whispered shut behind Captain Elena Morgan as she stepped out into the cold morning air. Her right hand clutched a folded piece of paper so tightly that the edges bent and frayed against her palm. The rejection letter. A letter written in polished corporate language, but carrying the same weight as shrapnel. Her jaw clenched. On her neck, partly hidden beneath the collar of her blouse, a jagged scar stretched down toward her collarbone. It was pale and rough, the aftermath of an IED blast on her third tour in Afghanistan. No amount of makeup or scarves could hide it completely, not when the summer heat made fabric unbearable. Inside, just 15 minutes ago, she had stood before the HR panel with steady composure, her portfolio open, her MBA diploma and recommendations neatly arranged. She had spoken with calm authority about optimizing global supply lines, about solving bottlenecks under fire, about reducing waste and increasing efficiency. Logistics under pressure wasn't theory to her, it was survival. The technical manager, a bespectacled man in his 40s, had been impressed. He nodded along as she detailed how she'd kept an entire battalion supplied through weeks of sandstorms, and how she'd rerouted convoys under enemy threat. His eyes had lit up when she explained how she once coordinated medical supply drops across 3 provinces in a single night. But then the scarf slipped. The HR director's smile faltered, eyes flicking down to the scar. Another interviewer exchanged a glance with his colleague, his pen tapping nervously against his notepad. Elena noticed, of course she noticed. She had trained herself to read people quickly. It had kept her alive in hostile terrain. The rejection came with a rehearsed smile. "We appreciate your time, Captain Morgan, but we're moving forward with another candidate. We're looking for someone who better represents the image of Helix Global." Elena had stood still for 3 seconds longer than polite, the letter placed in her hand like a consolation prize. She walked out silently, each step heavier than the last. Now, on the steps outside, she looked down at the letter. 8 years of service. 3 combat deployments. A Bronze Star for valor. And yet, none of it mattered in this world. Not when her scars told a story they didn't want to see. Her voice rasped as she muttered under her breath, half to herself, half to the empty street. "I kept an entire unit alive under fire, but I don't fit their image." A woman walking by tugged her son's hand sharply, eyes lingering too long on Elena's scar before she looked away. Elena noticed that too. She noticed everything. She sat on the stone steps, letter limp in her hand, staring out at the endless traffic. Not crying. Not even angry yet. Just still, the same stillness she'd learned in combat, the stillness before choosing a course of action. What she didn't know, sitting there in her quiet defeat, was that someone else had already made a phone call. Someone who had been waiting for the moment to keep a promise. 2 miles across town, in a modest apartment cluttered with half-packed moving boxes, Marcus, Mac, Delaney scrolled through LinkedIn. He'd been awake since dawn, sleep never came easily anymore, when he saw it. A single post, short, almost clinical in its phrasing, but he could hear Elena's voice through every word. Interview today. Rejection letter in hand. Not the image we want representing our company. 8 years of service. 3 combat deployments. Bronze Star. Apparently none of that matters when your scars do the talking. There was no bitterness in her tone, no anger, just fact. That was Elena all over. Calm under fire, steady under pressure. But Mac knew the cost behind those words. He'd been there the day she dragged him out of a burning Humvee, her throat torn open, bleeding but refusing to stop until every man in their convoy was accounted for. He whispered to himself, "God damn it, Morgan." Mac had always known this day would come. Civilian life was not built for people like them. He'd told her once, half joking, half dead serious, that the world loved soldiers until they came home. Then all those medals and scars turned into inconveniences people didn't want to look at. He picked up his phone and scrolled to a number he hadn't dialed in 3 years. A number given to him by a man who never broke his word. The line clicked. A voice on the other end answered sharply. "Maddox." "Colonel, it's Delaney," Max said, his tone already steady, military sharp. You remember Captain Elena Morgan? A pause. Then, of course I do. She saved my son's life in Ghazni province. Why are you asking? Mac hesitated only for a breath. Because she just got spit on by some corporate suits who didn't see past her scar. They told her she wasn't the right image for their company. On the other end of the line, silence stretched. Then Maddox's voice came low and controlled, the kind of voice that preceded orders in the field. Where? Mac gave the address. He heard papers shuffle, the faint clink of metals as if Maddox had stood from his desk. Stay where you are, Maddox said. We'll handle this. The call ended without another word. Mac stared at the phone for a long moment, exhaling slow. He could already hear it in his head, the rumble of engines, the sound of boots hitting pavement, the weight of men and women who had seen war and would not stand by while one of their own was shamed. Meanwhile, Elena sat on the steps of Helix Global, staring at the city traffic like it was another kind of battlefield. She folded the rejection letter and tucked it into her jacket pocket. The weight of it wasn't paper-thin anymore. It was heavy, like a verdict. But 20 minutes later, that weight was about to shift. Because down the street, 6 black military SUVs were already rolling in formation, their tinted windows gleaming under the noon sun, heading straight for Helix Global Logistics. The first sound was low, a distant hum beneath the noise of traffic. Elena barely registered it at first, still sitting on the building's stone steps, her mind replaying the interview in loops. Then it grew louder. Engines, big ones, moving in unison. A deep, coordinated rumble that didn't belong to delivery vans or city buses. Heads turned on the street. Pedestrians slowed, frowning as the sound thickened, rolling closer like approaching thunder. Elena finally lifted her head. 6 matte black SUVs swung into view, turning the corner in perfect formation. Their windows were tinted, their grills sharp and aggressive. Government plates gleamed in the sunlight. The vehicles moved as one, precise, deliberate, not like civilian traffic, but like a convoy heading into contested territory. People on the sidewalk froze. A food vendor stopped mid-sale, paper bag dangling in his hand. A cyclist braked so hard she almost toppled. Phones came out instantly. This was something worth recording. The convoy slowed as it reached the company entrance, engines growling deep. One by one, the SUVs pulled into place, fanning out diagonally across the driveway until they formed an impenetrable wall. The building's glass doors reflected the row of vehicles like a barricade from another world. Inside, Helix employees pressed against the second-floor windows, phones raised, faces lit by both curiosity and unease. Security guards at the front scrambled, hands instinctively reaching for radios. But they didn't move forward. Not yet. Something in the posture of those vehicles told them this wasn't the kind of confrontation their training manuals had prepared them for. The lead SUV's engine cut. Silence fell heavy. Then the driver's door opened. Colonel James Maddox stepped out, boots striking pavement with deliberate weight. He was in full dress uniform, crisp, decorated, ribbons and medals flashing under the noon sun. His posture radiated authority, shoulders squared, jaw set like carved stone. Behind him, more doors opened. One after another, 5 more officers emerged: Lieutenant Colonel Rivas, Captain Dawson, Master Sergeant Holt, Major O'Neill, Chief Warrant Officer Price. Each one immaculate in uniform, each one decorated, each one carrying the weight of a career forged in places most civilians would never dare to tread. Together, they moved forward and formed a line at the foot of the company steps, standing at rigid attention. Their presence was like an iron wall, their silence louder than a protest chant. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Holy hell, are those?" Another cut in. "That's military brass. Rio brass." Elena blinked up at them, stunned. Her instinct was to rise, muscle memory from years of service. But she stayed seated, her body caught between shock and the old reflex to fall into formation. Colonel Maddox's eyes found her immediately. For the first time, his features softened, just a fraction. He gave her a curt nod, the kind only fellow soldiers understood. We've got you. Then he turned toward the glass doors of Helix Global Logistics. His voice carried like a command on the battlefield. I'm here to speak to whoever decided Captain Elena Morgan was unfit to represent this company's image. The words hit like artillery, echoing off the marble facade. The entire lobby behind the glass froze. Employees craned their necks. Security radios crackled, but no one moved. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of idling engines from the SUVs. And then Maddox added, voice harder now. Bring them down here. Now. Inside the lobby, the silence fractured. Phones buzzed as employees texted coworkers upstairs. A receptionist whispered frantically into her headset, eyes darting toward the line of decorated officers outside the glass doors. Security hovered by the elevators, their radios chattering nervously, but not one of them moved forward. Finally, the elevator dinged. The HR director stepped out. Victoria Lang. Mid-40s, sleek navy suit, heels clicking against the marble. She carried herself with the forced composure of someone used to power in boardrooms, but her face was pale, and her fingers trembled against the file folder she clutched. Every eye followed her as she walked across the lobby, each step slower than the last. The glass doors slid open with a hiss. The summer heat pressed in as Victoria stepped outside, blinking against the sunlight and the line of uniforms staring her down. Colonel Maddox didn't move. His men stood unflinching at his flanks, their medals glinting like silent witnesses. Elena, still seated on the steps, turned her head just enough to look at the woman who had handed her the rejection letter. Victoria cleared her throat. Gentlemen, Colonel, there seems to be some kind of misunderstanding. Her voice wavered on the word misunderstanding. Maddox stepped forward, boots striking the pavement like punctuation. Misunderstanding? His tone carried the weight of battlefield authority, the kind that made men half his age snap to attention. Let me clarify this misunderstanding. You rejected Captain Elena Morgan because of the scar on her throat. Because she doesn't fit your polished image. Is that correct? The HR director's lips parted, but no words came. Answer me. Maddox barked. Victoria flinched, her corporate armor cracking. We have presentation standards for client-facing positions. We have to consider how. Standards? A gravelly voice cut her off. Master Sergeant Holt, towering at Maddox's right, stepped forward. His chest bore campaign ribbons that told stories of firefights and desert nights. His glare was unrelenting. Ma'am, your standards wouldn't survive 5 minutes outside this lobby. Victoria's mouth opened, then closed again. Around them, the crowd swelled, employees pressing closer to the glass, pedestrians clustering on the sidewalk, phones raised high, recording every word. Maddox's voice dropped lower, deadlier. This woman. He gestured to Elena, still seated, scar catching the sun. Kept soldiers alive in situations you can't even imagine. She rerouted convoys under fire. She dragged men through burning wreckage. She bled out on the sand and kept fighting. And you have the audacity to say she's not presentable enough for your lobby? Victoria's gaze darted toward the onlookers, the sea of cameras capturing her every flinch. This isn't the right venue to. This is exactly the right venue, Maddox snapped, voice rising like a battlefield command. Because you didn't just reject Captain Morgan. You rejected every man and woman who came home with scars that tell the story of sacrifice. You rejected the truth of what service costs. The air was thick, electric. Elena slowly stood, her rejection letter still in her hand. She didn't speak yet, her rasping voice would come later. For now, she let the colonel's words hang in the air, watched as Victoria Lang seemed to shrink beneath them. Behind her, one of the employees inside mouthed to another, "This is going viral." They were right. The first clip hit TikTok less than 3 minutes after Colonel Maddox's words rattled the lobby windows. A bystander across the street, shaky hands clutching her phone, caught the moment he pointed at Elena's scar and thundered. You rejected every man and woman who came home with scars that tell the story of sacrifice. The video spread like wildfire. Within 20 minutes, it had crossed 100,000 views. Within an hour, 1,000,000. But inside the moment, Elena wasn't thinking about hashtags or trending feeds. She watched the crowd beyond the SUVs, their faces glowing blue from screens as they filmed. She watched Victoria Lang falter under the gaze of half a city block, her polished words unraveling into stammers. "This isn't the place to." Victoria tried again, voice thinner now. "Wrong," Maddox snapped, his jaw tight. "This is the place. In front of your employees. In front of the people you expect to follow your polished image. Let them see what your standards really are." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the onlookers. Elena finally spoke, her voice a rasping whisper that cut sharper than shouting. "I once carried a soldier without legs through enemy fire. 200 yards. I didn't stop until he was safe." She held up the rejection letter, paper trembling only slightly. "And now, apparently, I'm not good enough to carry a clipboard in your office." The crowd froze. Even Victoria faltered, her mouth working silently like a fish gasping for air. Phones everywhere caught the moment. Some people lowered them, not out of disinterest but respect, as if recording felt like trespassing on something too raw to interrupt. Behind Maddox, Major O'Neill stepped forward, voice firm but calm. "We don't leave our own behind. Not on the battlefield, not here. Captain Morgan stood when others couldn't. She bled so others could come home. And you think a scar makes her less? No. That scar is proof she gave more than any of you will ever understand." From somewhere in the crowd, someone shouted, "Say it louder!" And the chant began. At first just 2 or 3 voices. "Say it louder! Say it louder!" Then a dozen. Then the whole block seemed to echo with it, bouncing off glass and steel until it became a roar. The security guards exchanged nervous glances, hands frozen on their radios. This wasn't a disturbance they could contain. This was a storm. Inside the lobby, employees filmed with wide eyes. Some nodded, others mouthed silent agreement. One young woman turned to her colleague and whispered, "She's more qualified than half the execs here." And then the hashtags began. Hashtag Captain Morgan. Hashtag Scars of Honor. Hashtag Helix Shame. The tide was turning faster than Victoria Lang could breathe. By nightfall, Helix Global's glass and steel headquarters wasn't just a building anymore, it was a symbol. 100 feet of sidewalk outside had turned into a gathering ground. Strangers showed up not to protest policy, but to stand witness. Veterans in faded ball caps, parents carrying kids on their shoulders, college students with handmade signs scribbled in sharpit. "Scars are strength." But the real battlefield was online. The first viral clip of Colonel Maddox had hit 10 million views before midnight. Another video, filmed from a higher office window, showed the entire convoy of black SUVs blocking the entrance like a fortress. Twitter captions read, "They told a war hero she wasn't pretty enough for their company. Her family came anyway." On Instagram, veterans began posting pictures of their own scars, burn marks, missing limbs, shrapnel wounds. Some wrote only a single sentence. "This is my interview suit." On Facebook, a page called Stand with Captain Morgan gained 300,000 followers in less than 12 hours. Each post carried stories from people who had been rejected for jobs not because of skills, but because of scars, disabilities, or trauma. A Marine named Jackson posted a photo of his prosthetic leg. Caption: "Lost this in Helmand. Lost 3 jobs because of it, too. But yeah, tell me again about company image." A former Army nurse uploaded a shaky selfie in a VA hospital hallway. Her caption read, "IED shattered my jaw. They said my voice sounded too unnatural for customer service. I've answered calls under incoming mortar fire. But I wasn't enough for them either." Each post tagged hashtag Captain Morgan. Each post poured gasoline on the fire. By the second morning, CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC were running split-screen coverage of the Helix confrontation. Anchors replayed the moment Elena rasped, "I carried a soldier without legs 200 yards, letting the silence after those words hang on live television. The company's PR department scrambled. A thin statement appeared on Helix Global's social channels. We deeply respect all veterans. We are reviewing our hiring processes to ensure fairness. It was too little, too late. Screenshots of internal Helix emails leaked by an anonymous employee hit Reddit and spread like wildfire. One message, written by a senior VP, read, "The candidate presents with a severe throat scar and vocal impairment. Not suitable for client-facing roles given our brand's premium image." The damage was nuclear. By noon, the company's Google reviews dropped from 4.2 stars to 1.3. Major clients were reevaluating partnerships. Their stock slid 12% in 2 trading sessions. Meanwhile, Elena sat in her small apartment, blinds half drawn, the rejection letter still on her desk. Her phone buzzed endlessly with notifications she hadn't opened. She hadn't asked for this war. But this one had found her anyway. And like every war before, she wasn't going to run from it. By the 3rd day, Helix Global's headquarters looked less like an office tower and more like a besieged fortress. Satellite trucks lined the street, their dishes pointed skyward. Reporters clustered at the barricades, microphones in hand, shoving each other for position. Every pedestrian who walked by slowed to snap photos. Every employee who entered the building was met with jeers, camera flashes, and a sea of protest signs. Hire heroes, not models. Scars are the price of freedom. Helix equals heartless. The company tried damage control. Their CEO, Leonard Grayson, appeared on CNBC, jaw tight as he recited prepared lines about miscommunication and corporate image expectations. But the host cut him off mid-sentence and rolled the clip of Colonel Maddox demanding, "You rejected every man and woman who came home with scars." The side-by-side split screen made Grayson look like a man standing on sand while a tidal wave rose behind him. By afternoon, the tidal wave reached Washington. Senator Alicia Martinez of New York announced she was drafting legislation to expand veteran employment protections. Standing on the Capitol steps, she told reporters, "If a company has federal contracts and rejects a veteran because of their appearance or disability from service, they're not just discriminating. They're betraying the very people who fought for their right to exist as businesses in this country." Within hours, 3 more lawmakers echoed her call. Committees whispered about hearings. The Department of Labor issued a statement promising to review compliance of federal contractors with veteran employment protections. The storm had crossed from hashtags into law. But the eye of that storm sat in a 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of the city. Elena had ignored her phone for as long as she could. She wasn't built for interviews, wasn't built for lights and microphones. But the calls kept coming. Veterans organizations, nonprofits, news anchors, even NATO's regional logistics coordinator. Her inbox flooded with messages that began with, "Captain Morgan, we saw your story." When she finally answered one call, it wasn't a journalist or politician. It was Brigadier General Patricia Chin. "Elena." The general's voice was calm but firm. "I don't need to tell you what's happening out there. You've lit a fuse, whether you meant to or not. And right now, the country needs to hear more from you. Not me. Not Maddox. You." Elena's throat tightened, the scar pulling as she swallowed. "General, I didn't ask for this. I just wanted a job." "I know," Chin said softly. "But you're not just a candidate anymore. You're a symbol. You can either let others twist that symbol, or you can own it. We've both seen what happens when you let someone else write your story." Silence stretched. Elena stared at the rejection letter still lying on her desk, edges curled now from being folded and unfolded too many times. Finally, she rasped, "What exactly are you asking me to do?" Chin didn't hesitate. "Step up. Again." The request weighed on Elena all night. She sat at her kitchen table, rejection letter still beside her, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. The glow of her laptop screen lit her scar, a pale reminder in the dim light. Notifications pinged every few seconds, each one another reminder that the world was waiting. She drafted 3 statements. Deleted them all. Too polished, too corporate, too far from her voice. She tried again, this time typing as if she were writing to a fellow soldier, not an audience of millions. By dawn, her message was ready. She opened her LinkedIn page, the same platform where she had quietly posted about the rejection, and clicked post. 3 days ago, I interviewed at Helix Global Logistics. I was told I did not fit their company image. The truth is, my scar is the result of a convoy bombing in Afghanistan. I got it while pulling soldiers out of burning vehicles. I didn't choose this scar, but I would choose those men again every single time. I am not writing this for sympathy. I am writing this because too many veterans carry scars, visible or invisible, that cost us opportunities we've earned. If my story has become a symbol, then let it stand for one thing: scars mean survival. Scars mean sacrifice. And they should never disqualify us from serving again in a different way. I don't need a company to tell me my worth. But I do need this country to remember ours. Asterisk. She hesitated before hitting publish, heart pounding like it had before her first jump from AC-130. Then she pressed the button. Within 30 minutes, the post had 50,000 likes and 12,000 shares. By the end of the day, it crossed 3 million. Veterans commented first. Then nurses. Firefighters. Cancer survivors. People who bore scars of every kind. The feed became a flood of photos and testimonies. I was told my prosthetic was unprofessional. I lost my hair to chemo and my job in the same year. My PTSD label cost me 3 interviews. The hashtag shifted from hashtag Captain Morgan to something broader. Hashtag scars mean strength. News outlets replayed her words, anchormen reading them aloud over slow pans of her convoy photo from Afghanistan, the one where she was crouched over a wounded soldier, flames in the background. That evening, Maddox called. His voice, always commanding, now carried something warmer. You did good, Morgan. You just gave half this country permission to be seen. Elena leaned back in her chair, exhausted but steady. She hadn't asked to be a symbol, but she understood something now. The war she thought she'd left behind wasn't over. It had just changed battlefields. And this time, she wasn't fighting for survival. She was fighting for recognition. Helix Global woke up on fire. By the 4th morning, their clients weren't just reconsidering partnerships, they were walking away. 2 major defense contractors announced they were suspending contracts. A European logistics partner issued a terse statement. We cannot align our brand with discriminatory practices. The stock free fell another 18% before trading halted. At noon, Leonard Grayson, CEO, stepped down. Effective immediately. By evening, Helix's board announced an external audit of all hiring practices. But the mea culpa read more like a casualty report than a recovery plan. No amount of spin could erase the scar Elena's story had carved across their image. Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, hearings were set. The House Committee on Veterans Affairs called for executives from Helix, and other federal contractors, to testify about employment discrimination. Senators Martinez and Dunn introduced the Veterans Fair Employment Act, nicknamed by journalists as the Captain Morgan Bill. And Elena? She spent most of that day still in her apartment, blinds half drawn, trying to keep her world small. She didn't want the noise, the cameras, the circus. But her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from veterans she'd never met. Parents of soldiers. Even a schoolteacher in Ohio who wrote, "My students watched your post in class. You made them understand service in a way a textbook never could." That night she got a different kind of call. "Captain Morgan?" the voice asked. Smooth, professional, but warm. "This is Director Hayes, Department of Veterans Affairs. I'll be blunt. We need you." Elena pinched the bridge of her nose. "Need me for what?" "To help us rebuild something broken. We're launching a national initiative to connect veterans with careers that value their service, not penalize their scars. We want you on the advisory board." Elena stared at the wall. She had fought wars in deserts, dragged men from burning trucks, carried weight no one should carry. And now the government wanted her in a conference room with bureaucrats? Her silence stretched. Hayes didn't fill it. Finally, she rasped, "I'm not a politician." Hayes chuckled softly. "No. You're better. You're real. And that's exactly why people are listening to you." Elena's hand brushed the scar at her throat, rough under her fingers. The symbol she never asked for. The weight she hadn't chosen. And yet, maybe this was the mission she had left. 2 weeks later, Elena stood on a stage in Washington, the seal of the Department of Veterans Affairs projected behind her. The room was packed. Lawmakers, reporters, veterans, ordinary citizens who had followed her story since that first viral post. She adjusted the microphone. The scar along her neck caught the lights, sharp and unmissable. For the first time, she didn't try to hide it. "I never wanted to be here," she began, voice steady. "I wanted a job. I wanted to serve quietly, the way so many of us do after we leave uniform behind. But what happened with Helix Global showed me something bigger. We are still fighting to be recognized, not for what we lost, but for what we gave." A hush held the room. "Scars," she continued, running her hand briefly along her throat, "are not weakness. They are proof. Proof that we stood in the fire and walked back out so others didn't have to. Proof that we carried the weight. And if this country cannot see the strength in that, then we need to change the way this country sees." Applause began at the back and rolled forward, rising until it filled the chamber. Not polite clapping. The kind that carried conviction. Later, as cameras flashed and aides hustled her toward the exit, a young veteran in a wheelchair rolled forward through the crowd. He reached out, stopping her with a hand on her arm. His face was scarred, one eye clouded. "Captain," he said quietly, voice shaking, "you spoke for me today. For all of us." Elena felt her throat tighten. She squeezed his shoulder once, firm. "No," she said. "I spoke with you." That night, back in her small apartment, she looked at the folded rejection letter one last time. Instead of tucking it away, she slid it into a drawer, buried under old field maps and deployment photos. Not forgotten, but no longer her weight to carry. Outside, the city buzzed. Somewhere in the distance, chants from a rally echoed. "Scars mean strength." Elena closed her eyes, exhaled, and let herself believe it. For the first time since Afghanistan, she wasn't just surviving. She was leading.